Welcome back to Relationships Over Reps with Rich Lansky and Johnny Parker.
Coach, glad to hear you back here with us.
Coach, glad to be back. And I think I'm really fired up about today's topic.
Well, it's a great topic. We're going to be looking at advice to new coaches.
All right, well, fire away. Let's get started.
All right, so let's look at it this way. I'm going to give you a scenario. You are a brand new coach. You just got your degree from a accredited university, and your degree was in exercise science. While you were at school, you volunteered with the strength and conditioning department. Unfortunately, while you learned a lot, they didn't really give you a lot of um, pure coaching experience. You watched a lot, but you did a lot of cleaning up and a lot of wiping down equipment, and a lot of paperwork and setting up the field and taking it down. You didn't get to really coach that much, unfortunately. And then you went and did an internship outside at a private facility where you got to teach some speed and some agility and some lifting, and you did get to coach, but you were coaching more school age youth and maybe some middle school kids. And now you're out there, you just took your certification test, you passed it, and you're ready to get your first job in the field. What would the three piece of advice that you would have for this person?
Uh, Coach, that's easy. First is decide what you think is important and whatever that is. Shirt tails in, and whatever, makes no difference. But decide what you think is important. Don't ever compromise on it, because if you do, you'll never get it back until you without changing job. Changing job is the only way to get it back. And then I would also say, if you can tell time, you're in the wrong business. And by that I mean, don't worry about how many hours you're working. And you figure out, man, I'm making $1 an hour or something. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You know, if all of us have to start out at the bottom, and then you don't work your way up, you earn your way up. And then I would tell them also to volunteer for every single task or job, especially the ones that nobody else wants to do. You do them and be glad of it. Then I would tell them be the first one to leave, get to the first one to get there, last one to leave. And then I would tell them this: drive your head coach crazy with questions. Question him about everything. And then you should keep a notebook. At the end of every day, or whenever you have a chance, but certainly the day of the event, a situation that how you would have handled it and how the head coach handled it. That's very important, because once you get your own job where you're running the show, initially they're going to be about half a dozen things a day that cross your desk. And you say to yourself, gosh, man, I never knew I'd have to deal with that. Or I don't know, I hadn't seen that before. Keep that notebook so that you'll have some idea of how to handle things. Uh, and there'll be a lot of situations covered in your notebook that you will need to handle once you become a head coach. And remember this now: when you become a head coach, you can't, there's a discipline issue. You can't say, well, I'll look this up in my notebook and, I'll get back at it tomorrow. Consequences need to be instant. So know how you're going to handle the major discipline situations and motivation situations, and go for it with great confidence, because you've given it a lot of thought already. Now, coach, I'll just give this as an example. I think when I went to Ole Miss, in my initial meeting with the team, as I was winding down, I just said, if you'll notice that I didn't say anything about being late, and that's because nobody's going to be late. And sure enough, 4 years there, nobody was ever late. So, I think that is part of creating an environment where you don't have to punish guys. Coach, those are the major things to me. One other thing, and that I forgot, is don't say, well, they don't pay me enough to do this. Heck with it. Do it. Just do it. You knew the pay going in. So don't complain about the pay. And don't complain about what your boss tells you to do to earn that pay. Now, Coach, I've exhausted my complete repertoire of things I believe that I would tell a young coach or a new coach. It goes back to the eye of the coach. After a while, you know what to do. When any situation comes up, but it ain't gonna be away. It's gonna be after you've coached a bunch of years. But you just instinctively know what to do. And you have a few principles that guide your coaching, and you just apply those principles to this situation and make it fit.
I got you. So let me ask you this, Coach. A new coach, he watches a session. Let's say he's an assistant coach. He watches a session and he notices that somebody is struggling, trying to make his reps and sets. It's just not there today. But the head coach says we don't back off. Everybody's got to do the work. How does the new coach deal with something that he sees, but the head coach is not willing to see it?
Coach, that's easy. You're working for the head coach. If he says we don't back off, then you don't back off. Do you think you should? Absolutely. Put that in your notebook. When the player's really struggling, back off. But, coach, it all depends on why he's struggling. If it's because he was out till 2 a.m. drinking beer and chasing women, then that's tough. You just have to suck it up and go. So, you have to know the player. And one of my principles of leadership is listen to the warriors and ignore the phonies. And if coach, if a player comes in and tells me that, coach, I don't know what I'll be able to do today. I was up all night studying, or I was, whatever, but I didn't get much sleep, or I'm tired, or I got the cold coming on, any of that stuff. It's, my reply was always, well, I know what you can do. You're going to have the best workout that you've ever had with me. That's what you'll be able to do. And coach, it amazed me, but a lot of times that's what they did. Had the best workout ever, but they didn't think they could do anything. So, coach, don't let players' minds defeat them. If they think they can't do much, then they probably won't do much.
All right, Coach, I'm going to shift gears. I want to take us back just to what I was talking about before, because I'm going to give you a second scenario, which is a little more serious, especially with a couple of things that have just happened recently in our field. All right. I am the young assistant coach. I notice that somebody's struggling, but it's more than just struggling. It looks like that they're in a position where they are unsafe and that they look like they're going to drop. They look unwell. They don't look like.
Coach, you got to get them out right away. Doesn't matter what anybody else says. You got to get them out.
There you go.
And that's the trainer. You need to have a trainer with you. Call the trainer over and make sure that kid is getting the proper attention, or is getting attention. You have to assume it'll be proper. And see how he's doing, even if you have to neglect the rest of your group for a few minutes.
And that's what I want.
Maybe-
That's what I wanted to clarify when I was talking about when somebody wasn't making it. So I should have been more
Okay.
specific. I was talking more of a medical safety issue because I'll be honest, when I was a couple of years ago, I got into it with one of our position coaches um, about a concussed athlete. And I basically was ready to walk over it. And I had to basically call somebody above, if this sounds crazy, above the position coach's head to get this kid out and to medical.
Oh, I wouldn't wait on anything. I wouldn't wait. The head coach would tell me whatever he wants to tell me. That's fine. He can fire me on the spot.
There you go.
But I ain't killing some kid now.
There you go. And that's
Our
what
job is
I
to
want to
help them, not
communicate
to
that.
kill them.
I want to communicate that to young coaches. In the end, and we've talked about this before, that athlete's well-being is our responsibility, especially in a strength and conditioning or practice point. And that's a trust that is given to us by a much higher level as also. And I always tell young coaches when they're designing programs, sometimes they'll design a program and they have no idea what that program feels like because they've never put themselves through a program like that. They have no idea what the legs feel like when onset of blood lactate accumulates to the point where your legs go rubbery, or they don't understand what it feels like if they're working on a work rest ratio of 1 to 0.5. So one of the things I always tell them before you start having your athletes do something and you're not sure how they're going to respond physically, physiologically, or psychologically, put yourself through that workout or something similar. And the second thing,
wait a minute. From back the last 30 years or so, if I'd put myself through the workout, I'd be the one needing the trainer and an ambulance. So
well,
that after a while, that doesn't work because I couldn't do it anymore.
and that is the beauty of why every veteran strength coach, once they hit a certain age, and that could be a training age, an orthopedic age, a chronological age, should have an assistant that can do this stuff. What they, at some point,
You mentioned all those different types of ages. I fit them all.
yeah. So I
Running
remember,
all different ages that I could be or hit or whatever.
I remember one time I was in my early 50s and I jumped in and we were running 10-yard repeats with a 10 to 15-second rest in between. And basically, when I finished, one of the other coaches looked at me and said, "Coach, I think it's time for you to get a demo guy." So, facing your own mortality and reality. But I do think that coaches need to understand what we're asking those athletes to do because it is a tremendous responsibility. And for young coaches, I'm going to say before you throw a whole bunch of stuff on the whiteboard, you need to figure out either through yourself or somebody else how this is going to affect the athletes you have. Just like, there are coaches that get a new position. I had a coach reach out to me this summer. He was starting with a new school. And the first day in, he wanted to set the tone with these guys, just like you had talked about in the beginning. Figure out what's important to you, set the tone. But his way of saying the tone in his mind was just to work them hard. Minimum rest breaks only as needed. Give the kids water, of course. We're in Florida and stuff like that. But kind of come in there and how should I say, kick the door open and get to work type stuff. And my first question was, what have these guys been doing for the last 4 weeks since the end of school before you got there? They said nothing. Said you might want to rethink about physically what you're going to ask them to perform, unless you want to keep the athletic trainer really busy that day.
Exactly, Coach. There's nobody that believes in hard work more than me. Because, Coach, this football is a hard, tough game. And, they can't play ring around the rosy or tag all off season and then expect to have a tough team when the season starts. So, Coach, and I think that sums it all up. You better have done it yourself or have an assistant that's done it, and so that you'll know for sure. But then, Coach, after a number of years, you know what athletes can accomplish or what the loading that they can take and thrive on. And then you also know, obviously, if you know what they thrive on, you know what is detrimental to performance. So, anyway, Coach, I go back to what those Russian coaches told me. It made me so mad. It's the I of the coach. And Coach, I know this. I mean, that there was not a lot of times, but there were several times when I would uh, I would stop a workout and I would apologize to the team. I'd say, "Look, this is my fault. Y'all are giving it everything you got, and yet this workout is too much. So here's what we're going to do. Forget what's in your notebook or on the board, and this is what we're changing it to." And then again, I would apologize to them. My admiration for you guys just went up another notch. I didn't think I could admire you or respect you any more than I already did. Well, I was wrong because my admiration and respect for you just went up a notch today. Here, y'all were trying to cover for my stupidity in writing a workout that was too hard, and y'all were fighting it and doing the very best you could. And it's impossible for you to do it. And that was my fault.
I like
So
that.
we're
I
backing
like that,
off.
Coach. When you put, because you don't want them thinking that they failed.
No.
So, Coach, here's one for you, especially when dealing with football. One of the things I found um, very helpful over the probably last 20 years since I got back full time at the high school um, was I'm pulling an audible. And the football guys understand what an audible is. So an audible, I explained to them, is when we're going to adjust what we had planned to do based on what we're seeing out of the opponent. In this case, based on what we're seeing in a bunch of different things. It could be the fact that we don't have any air conditioning in the gym today. It could be the fact that coach decided to spend an extra hour above what was planned doing 7-on-7 and running routes, and legs might be a little bit more tired than I thought before. We're supposed to get out there and squat up to 90% for 5 sets of doubles. So as a coach, you need to be prepared to pull that audible, to call the audible and adjust it. That doesn't mean you're going to back off and you're not going to work hard. It just means you're going to work smart. What do you think?
Absolutely. And Coach, if you've written a workout that they physically can't do for whatever the reason, then Coach, they won't progress by struggling and fighting and maybe not making all their reps. And really that becomes a max workout that you can't even do, because there's too many max sets in there. So, but if you back off to something that you're sure they can do, Coach, that bar starts moving faster, which is certainly one of your primary goals. So, anyway, Coach, I like the term audible. And by the way, do more than you are paid to do. And it doesn't matter how long it takes.
No. And you can put that in terms again on the football field, on the field. If your assignment is to, as a wide receiver, is to block and move your guy to the inside, move the DB to the inside on a jet sweep when the running back is coming around or another wide receiver is coming around behind, and your job's to block, but there's a fumble and the ball's going the other way. Now your job is to tackle. You better be willing to tackle too.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I remember Coach Parcells jumping all over Drew Bledsoe, Drew's rookie year. This is in practice. He threw an interception and just stood there and watched the guy return it. And boy, Coach Parcells was all over him. He told him, Bledsoe, we got 10 guys covering for your mistake. and you're the one that screwed it up, and you just stand there and watch. You were going to become an expert tackler, Bledsoe. Because when you throw one, you better think it's up to me to make the tackle. So, that's Coach. We were playing Denver. In Denver, all they had to do was win, and they were in the playoffs. We had been eliminated the week before. It's the last week of the season. They win and they're in. We'd been eliminated the week before. Well, Alex Smith throws a stop pattern to Frank Gore, and he overthrows him. And this is Gore's first year or second year. I don't remember which. Anyway, I think it's their second year. Anyway, Coach, it's Champ Bailey that intercepts it, and boy, he takes off. He's gone. And what I noticed was that Gore didn't take one step chasing Champ Bailey. Not one step. He just stood there and watched. And Coach, I just lost it. I was up on the sideline just screaming, chase the ball, Gore, chase the ball, just screaming it. And I mean, it was nonstop. And Coach, when Frank got over to the sideline, and I was still screaming it just as loud, and you know what he said? He said, "You're right, Coach." Now, that told me right there that Frank Gore was a real football player, that he wanted to be held accountable for his mistakes. And that was an egregious mistake there, not chasing the ball. Now, Coach, one other thing, and I'm getting us back, I think, more on track. Coach, not because it was me or anything, it just, kids did this. They would tell me they just graduated with a degree in exercise science, and they'd like to come work for us. And I would tell them, the NFL is no place for on-the-job training. Better get several years' experience and then think about it. So, and coaches, I'll be honest, a significant amount of what they teach in school is wrong. Like linear periodization, Coach, that is out. That undulating periodization doesn't have to be exactly the way we did it, but undulating periodization is much better. And Coach, guys will talk about, well, we'll start off with a hypertrophy phase, doing 10s. Then we'll go to I don't know what they would call it, a power phase, doing 5s, and then a maximum strength and explosiveness phase, doing 3s. Well, Coach, if you're doing all 3s, what happens to that hypertrophy you gained? You'll lose it, or you'll lose a bunch of it. So, Coach, we tried to work on all qualities all the time. But for us, hypertrophy, we didn't ever do any of the major lifts. 10, 6 is as high as we got. So, Coach, also, if you're coaching, you mentioned middle school kids, and they've probably never done this before. Coach, instead of doing, bench presses and curls, they need to do the snatch and the clean and jerk. Because at that age, their nervous system is like putty. You can shape it and mold it any way you want to. So they should be doing the more complex lifts when they start. And I think I said this, that you don't ever max a young kid. Are you kidding? You don't do that. But you you can certainly estimate in your mind, just by watching him, what his maximum capability is at that time. And you don't ever go over 70% of that with a young kid, and no more reps in a set than 4. Because if they're young and not conditioned, then your form starts breaking down at or above 4. And that's the last thing you want. You want everything you do to be considered perfection of technique. So you can't do sixes or eights or tens or anything with those young kids.
So, Coach, I think that goes back to another piece of advice we can give new coaches. One, be open to learning new things and adapting things from what you've learned in books to real life. Two, if you're going to be open to learning new things, then you better leave your ego at the door, because guess what? You don't know everything there is to know. That's going to be really important, I think, for young coaches, because they'll come in there, especially if they've got a background in a specific sport or specific discipline or aspect of competitive sport, like weightlifting or powerlifting or bodybuilding or strongman or CrossFit, whatever it might be. Maybe it's track and field, but we have to recognize that we have biases. And just because we were good at something or that we fell in love with something doesn't mean that that's going to be the best choice for the athletes that we now have in front of us and the responsibility we have to train them.
Coach, I certainly agree with that. Coach, when talking to a young coach, I tell them you can't read enough. You can't call, and I wouldn't mind if they called a coach from another school or another team to ask for advice about how to do something. That wouldn't bother me. But, Coach, you have to decide what you believe in and major in that. Coach, you and I believe in free weights. And I know Coach Parcells, the only thing he knew about weights is he wanted squats and cleans. That's all he knew. But that's pretty good starting point there. But you have to decide what you are. Are you a machine guy? Then, and this is a free weight school, you need to go someplace where you can learn about machines. Although it'll take you about 10 minutes. But Coach, if you believe in free weights, just make sure that you accept a job where they are lifting weights and not pushing against a machine. And then hold your principles dear to your heart and don't give up on them or don't change them. And Coach, I'll say this. They've been trying to replace free weights since I first started. And I won't say how many years ago that was, but it's a bunch. And Coach, they hadn't come up with anything yet. They had these, what do they call them? Extra genies that the satellites used in space. Well, Coach, all those extra genie machines, they might be floating in space now because ain't nobody doing it. And then it was the Nautilus machines. That was the answer. And Coach, that theory has been debunked decisively. Then I don't know what this is. Oh yeah, Coach, isokinetic machines. Don't forget those. And Coach, they were fairly good, but you didn't get any resistance at the beginning. You really just lock out resistance, or lock out a little further that you got resistance. And if anybody not familiar with isokinetic machines, you don't need to know. But I'll just tell you this: they were dedicated to the principle that the harder you push, the harder it resisted. But there was no explosion in isokinetic machines. And then they got, I don't know, TRX or something, different rope or, something that you can do exercises on or with. Coach, I'm sure I'm skipping a couple, but
Coach, I'll throw a little overarching comment on this one. You remember Milo of Croatia?
Yes.
And he had the baby calf and he put it on his shoulders and walked around with it. And as the calf grew, he got stronger, his legs got stronger, his core got
he
stronger,
did
he
this
got
every
bigger.
day.
And eventually he was carrying a full-blown bull, right? So Milo Croatia put that baby calf on his back. He didn't put a leg extension on his back because that leg extension, even if it had a 250-pound stack, stayed at a 250-pound stack the entire time. So
Yeah.
there was no progressive resistance or increase in resistance over time. As Milo got stronger, he needed more resistance. I think that coaches need to explore some of the different things that are out there so that they can answer questions, because in today's world of YouTube and Twitter or X, whatever they call it, and Instagram, a kid sees something and he sees something that somebody's doing at some Division I program or some pro team or some off-season workout for some professional athlete, and comes in and goes, "Why can't we do this, coach?" Well, there's a couple answers I always give to that, but the first thing you have to know is, well, what are they actually doing in that picture? Because you have to be familiar with it. So if they're doing, let's say, a form of single leg plyometrics, you need to be able to explain to the kid what they're doing and what they're trying to do. But I usually tell my kids three things. I said, well, one, what you're seeing is what I call a highlight film or a snippet of the total training that person's doing. It's just one exercise. There's no context. It's kind of like if you read the Bible, you can take a biblical quote out of context easily by not looking at what came before or what came after. A lot of people do that. So you're seeing an exercise, but you're not seeing if that exercise is being done for rehab. You're not seeing if that exercise is being done as a warm-up, as a cool-down, because it's trying to correct an imbalance. You don't know. Number two, the person doing that activity is not you. Doesn't have the same parents, doesn't have the same genetics, and more so, does not have the same training history. So I had years ago, when I was doing NFL Combine Prep, I had an athlete come in from a Division I ACC school. And he comes in and he shows me a video of Troy Polamalu's training. And he says, "I want to do this training to get ready for the NFL." So I looked at him, I said, "You look different. You don't look like Troy Polamalu." And he said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, you're not Troy Polamalu. I mean, you don't have his background. You don't have his injury history. You don't have his training history. You don't have his genetics. And you don't even know why he's doing these exercises. You're just seeing a bunch of exercises that somebody filmed and is using to promote a certain trainer, a certain training facility. I mean, let's look at what you are dealing with. Let's look at your scouting report. Let's look at what your strengths and weaknesses are, and let's devise a program that helps you. If all you want to do is copy some guy's program on YouTube, I can save you a lot of money, and you can go back home and do that. And I think it's really important that people understand that just because a athlete who is very good at his job or her job does this type of training doesn't mean that's the right type of training for you. Coach?
I will. Oh yeah, Coach. One other thing that I wanted to mention. I hope I'm not repeating myself from past podcasts, but I was going to speak at, I don't know, NSCA convention or something, and I asked before I spoke, just during a break, they were just mingling in the crowd, and saying hello to guys I hadn't seen in a while, and I asked 5 different veteran strength coaches, what could I say that would help the young coaches the most? Now they weren't standing together; they were all, separate, groups of bull shooters. But every one of them, without hesitation, said humility. Now, to young coaches or new coaches, to be honest, you don't know you don't know anything. Your mind is like a blank tablet, but you can put knowledge into your mind every day. And by the way, a lot of what you think you know, you're wrong. And your head coach might have reasons above your ability to understand that that's what we're doing. And coach, oh yeah, another thing. Now I'm remembering all kind of stuff now. But coach, one of the things you cannot do is, there's a several guys over there talking about how hard the workout is. And they called you over there, Coach Lansky, what do you think about this workout, man? And you said, oh, it's longer than I intended for it to be. That's important. You know, there's just too many.
Lost you, Coach.
Coach, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about something, an experience that I had. But, oh, and Coach, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to admit mistakes. You know, a player will respect you more in the long run if you came up to him and just said, "Look, I owe you an apology. You asked me a question yesterday, and I gave you this answer, and I researched it last night, and I was wrong. I apologize, but I'm sure I have the right answer, and that is, you know, A, B, and C." You know, Coach, you can't pretend to know it all yourself. And as a young coach, just understand that your boss has done this for a lot longer than you have. And he has seen why things that look very attractive don't really work. And he's seen what does work. So,
And a good coach, a good mentor, is going to take the time to explain these things to you at the appropriate time. And that's another piece of advice I think we can give young coaches. Have a good mentor. Have somebody that does it right and has been doing it right for a long time that you can learn from. And when I say does it right, that doesn't always mean they have the best winning record. I mean, that always helps. But that means that they've done right by the athletes that have put their trust in them. They've helped them to become better athletes. They've helped them to become better people. They've helped them to achieve their dreams. And they've also worked well with other coaches and other coworkers. If you're a guy or a girl that all of a sudden is at a different program every year or every other year, and you start developing a reputation that you're a little tough to work side by side with, that's not their issue. That's your issue.
absolutely.
I mean, you've got to realize. I had a client years ago. He had just gone through a divorce, and he said, and he's an older guy. He goes, "I've been married 3 times. I've been divorced 3 times. I've had 3 business partners, and we've dissolved 3 different businesses. And I realized after a while, it's me. I'm the common denominator, and I have to recognize that." So he recognized, the weakness. But it's important that we know, just like with our athletes, where we're trying to design programs that help improve their weaknesses. It's important that we recognize our own weaknesses as coaches. One of the other advice I give coaches in the beginning is become a jack of all trades in the beginning. And what do I mean by that? That means not that you're going to be a master of all these different things, but learn as much as you can about as many different things as you can from as many different people, and make sure those people are all not just from, your school of thought. Go and talk to people who have other schools of thoughts. Go and talk to a high intensity guy. Go and talk to a speed first, strength second guy. Go talk to a machine guy. But learn as much as you can. I mean, Bruce Lee used to say, absorb everything, figure out what's important, hold on to that, and discard the rest. Well, that's fine. So in the beginning, you're a jack of all trades. But then, as you progress, I would tell coaches, become a master or an ace. So go from a jack to an ace, and be really good at the thing that excites you, that you're involved in, that you've shown that you have a talent for. So if that's teaching the Olympic lifts, or if that's teaching speed and agility work, and that's what you're really good at, become an ace. Be the best there is at that, and then surround yourself with other aces that fill in the blanks that you're not the best at. Put your ego aside and get other people to work side by side with, so that you can have a complete team that helps your athlete have the best chance of achieving their dreams. Coach?
Coach, that is so well put. That is so well put. Coach, I would like to say this, that part of your responsibility, or our responsibility as a coach, is to set a moral example for the players. That doesn't mean you preach to them, because there's no reason to curse a player or to have cursing in your vocabulary that you use where players hear you. You know, coach, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And I personally thought that it was my obligation to make sure that my language was squeaky clean. Also, coach, if you go into a club, you know, you're young and single, and or you go into a club one night and there's a table full of your players, and they say, "Hey, coach, come on over here. Let's pop a top together." And coach, get out of there, turn around and leave. Leave. Um, and this deal about buying booze for players, and coach, that's dumb. That's dumb. But anyway, coach, I just think it is so important for you to set a moral example for your players. And the best way you can do that is with your language. Don't talk like some bum.
So, Coach, I probably am in the minority around a lot of coaches, but I do not allow profanity in my weight room or during the workouts. And I tell the kids it is a lack of self-control that causes you to talk like that. So because if you start lipping off to a referee, you're going to find yourself out of the game. If you're in a job interview and you start dropping F-bombs, you're sending a message to that coach about, are you going to be able to sit there and talk to the media in a way that doesn't reflect positively on the club that you play with or the team. But the other thing that you want to think about is it's a matter of self-control, and you do have to be a moral example there. And I tell the kids at the high school level, I said, I want you to speak as if you were at Sunday dinner at grandma's house or that you're sitting in church. Okay? And the more you do that, it shows greater control for the athletes, get greater control. And I'll be honest with you, if you're a coach and you can't get your idea across or your intent across without dropping a bunch of F-bombs or cussing somebody up and down, you got some communication issues. And as a coach, and that's a weakness on your part.
Coach, let me sum this whole issue about a moral example up. It's a little poem that is stay with me forever. A careful fellow I want to be, for a little pair of eyes watches me, and everything I do or say, he'll follow in the exact same way.
Love it. And that's something we communicate to our kids on Friday nights too. You know, a lot of these kids from the youth leagues and elementary, they're watching you. They're watching the way you act on the field. They watch you, and they want to grow up to play for this team, this town, and they want to be like you. So you have a responsibility in how you act. And
Absolutely.
I do think that a lot of coaches will curse because they think, well, the kids respect that because they curse. I said, no, that's not it. They'll respect you more if you can get your idea across without having to curse.
Absolutely.
But that's cause for another conversation. Coach, this has been a great conversation. I think we'll have to come back and revisit with a couple more things because I definitely wanted to get into some of the ideas of going back to like the All Blacks, leave it better than you found it, sweep the sheds, those type of things, and instilling character within your strength and conditioning and your coaching. So I think we'll circle back and look at a couple of those things for maybe part 2 when we do episode 10. What do you think?
Absolutely. Coach, by the way, let me just say this about holding the players responsible. We would do neck twice a week. And particularly in San Francisco, those guys, when they'd get through, they'd all just leave their towel on the floor or on the bar or something. And the maintenance crew would come in and get it after the day was over. And then they'd wash them and dry them so they'd be ready for the next day. And Coach, I did not like that. And so finally I told the maintenance, leave the towels. I've told them to pick up their towels, and they don't do it. So here's what we're going to do is you don't pick up a single towel. Make them do it. And if they have to dry off with a dirty towel, tough. That's their fault. So anyway, and guess what? After one day of not picking up the towels by the maintenance crew, then somehow the players found it in themselves to do it themselves. So I'm kind of proud of that.
Yep, that's a great one to leave on. In fact, you have to earn certain things. They shouldn't be expected. And no one person is better than anybody else in that locker room or in that facility. Everybody contributes in some way, shape, or form to the success of that team, that club, that institution. And that includes maintenance. That includes the people that do the laundry, the people that take care of the equipment, the people that wipe down your stuff, the people that deliver your food, and not just the athletic trainers or the strength coaches or position coaches. Otherwise, you don't have it. Everybody has to pull their weight.
Another thing, Coach, by the way, I would insist my players treat everybody with respect. Maintenance crew, equipment guys, training room guys, whoever. Treat everybody with respect. Because you're no better than they are. You're just lucky that you have an ability that they didn't have. That's the only difference. So, I thought that was very important myself.
No. Go back to some of the biblical precepts we've talked about in the past. Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. And then the other thing I would say, when you're training people or talking to people, imagine somebody else talking to your own child.
Thank you for listening to Relationships Over Reps, episode number 10. We apologize that we did not get to finish our conversation today. We'll pick up with episode number 11 next week and finish on advice for young coaches.